Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Customer News. I'm Rafer Weigel.
And I'm Mike Giambattista. Rafer, let's get right to the headlines.
According to Google research, 98% of Americans switch devices daily, but 9 in 10 of us still expect a seamless experience despite switching channels and devices. So consumers are essentially everywhere, Mike. So how does data keep up?
It's called omni-channel. It's a term that's been bugging marketers for the past 10 years or so. It means everything, everywhere, all the time. And as it turns out, it's really expensive. And tracking consumer moves in order to try and anticipate their next steps is obtrusive, creepy, and now it could be illegal. Brands need to meet basic customer expectations for access, yes, but tracking micro movements isn't going to work. On the other hand, brands get a lot of latitude for just being authentic and transparent. Maybe basic brand authenticity is the cure.
A nearly $1 billion boondoggle for Citibank came from the result of a bad user interface. The error passed through 3 sets of eyes before tying the company up in court. As the customer follows up on this story, the lesson remains companies apparently need to do better in updating their UI, Mike?
An unoptimized user interface. A series of mistakes that are being blamed on bad UI just cost one of the largest and most technologically capable companies in the world $900 million, and the courts are saying they're not getting it back. But we don't need to make this about Citibank. This is really old news at this point, jaw-dropping old news. Let's make it instead an object lesson in user-centric design. Human-focused design matters, and now it has a price tag.
So according to one executive, this is kind of shocking. There are up to 235 different sources of data when it comes to marketing and sales. Now, obviously, that's a lot of data to keep up with and still have a seamless customer experience. So, Mike, the question is, how do you do that? How do you manage it, keep track of it, organize it, and then still somehow stay compliant?
Did you just say 235 data sources?
I did.
To me, that's a bit on the high side for most companies, but it still serves to illustrate the point that data integration is not a simple thing. If you spend your workday or some part of it working out customer solutions, you likely have some idea of the variety of data sources required to make your customer engine run smoothly. But think about this. Now that customers have the legal right to ask for their data to be deactivated or erased, that becomes a huge and complex undertaking.
Today's Roundtable Discussion delves deeper into the concept of making loyalty work in a post-pandemic world. We're honored to have Jake Kiser, the Chief Customer Officer at Stuzo, and joining us again, Dave Frankland, Principal at Atlaas. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So it's no surprise that consumer behavior has changed radically over the past year. Technology has had to change to keep up with that. Probably there aren't many spaces that have been affected so dramatically as C-store and fuel, because whereas the rest of industry essentially was shut down, people still needed to get gas for their cars. They still needed to go get the basic essentials. Jake, you do a lot of work in that space. What are some of the bigger changes you've seen technologically, or rather behaviorally?
I think from the beginning of the pandemic until now, which it's crazy to think that's been over a year, one of the biggest things that we're seeing is just I think first and foremost, a year ago, it was deemed a necessary business. And I think it's pretty easy to understand why. Here in the US, folks needed to still get gas, be it frontline workers or be it folks that were still moving goods around the country, which I think we saw a lot of. But I think as consumers' behavior changes went to less frequent trips, short periods of time inside of retail locations, the convenience store really stepped up and fit the bill in terms of what the consumer shopping habits were at the time. I think as we've now returned to a little bit more of a whatever our new normal is, as we want to define that, we've reverted back to, I think, where things were headed before the pandemic, which is that the convenience store is really a place where consumers' demands are being met as they're viewed across the, I think, holistic shopping habits. So I may buy a number of my things online and visit big box less often. I may make less frequent trips to, the Costco's of the world. I may make more frequent trips to the grocery store, and the convenience store is kind of filling the everyday spend need of those consumers and doing it in a way that I think has a very bright future as it fits into the whole landscape, outside of even a post-COVID world, if we want to call it that, Mike.
Achieving brand loyalty in any space is a difficult proposition, but I've been fascinated by what that means in C-store and fuel. And Jake, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that. It's a function of convenience so many times. So how do you equate that to brand loyalty?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, it's important to remind ourselves it's an incredibly competitive market with relatively thin margins, selling a lot of the same products to a lot of the same customers. There's not a whole lot of differentiation in terms of the thing you're selling. I think we've seen a number of brands that have done their best to create that differentiation, but at the end of the day, the consumer is buying something that's somewhat commoditized, and they're buying it for reasons that are very likely related to the product itself, maybe not the retailer. And so with that, this industry has some really interesting things going for it as it relates to customer loyalty. I think first and foremost, they see a ton of foot traffic or car traffic every day. They're not trying to drive people to their sites. They're often trying to get consumers to do something different that are there already. And so the loyalty needs to be to the products they buy at those sites. So for us, the way we think about this is the biggest thing that they can do from a loyalty perspective, they being the retailer, is first get to know who the customers are that are at their sites. And second, understand what incrementality looks like for those customers. If you can first identify who customers are, get to know them, and you can then understand what they're buying and give them offers that actually add value to the consumer, you're going to end up driving loyalty. And we talk a lot about internally, and I think we've talked about this pretty externally. And Mike, you've probably heard me say this over the years in different iterations, but if you do that the right way, if you identify who a customer is, if you have an exchange of value between the consumer and the brand that results in the outcome of loyalty and not the delivering of a loyalty program or launching a loyalty program, it's all about how do I drive that loyalty and how do I think about it as an outcome? And if you can do that in this industry, I think you've put yourself at a level above most of your competitors, which is what you see today in the market.
In other words, you see a lot of people, a lot of companies driving loyalty programs rather than call it, as you said, loyalty outcomes.
Absolutely. I mean, they're starting with, hey, I have to get a loyalty program in market, and not saying, hey, I need to drive these business outcomes for my business. And I need to do that by, leveraging data perhaps, or getting to know the customer better and delivering a differentiated experience or differentiated product set. They're just saying, hey, I need to get a program in market because that's what the market's telling me. I just think there's an opportunity to think about it differently. And that, I guess, would be the biggest opportunity for retailers in this vertical to take advantage of, which is what are the outcomes you can drive? And you can likely do it by launching a loyalty program. But the outcome is not launching it. The outcome is actually driving that ongoing loyalty with the consumer.
Right. Dave, that overlays with an awful lot of the conversations that you and I have had and the rest of the gang at Atlaas about actually starting with customer preferences and expectations first and understanding them. It's remarkable how unique that is in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's I like that term of loyalty as an outcome, right? I've talked in the past about sort of emotional loyalty. A program where it's points and rewards is often an end in its own sort of, it's just there for itself. It's not engendering loyalty. I think I even have talked over the years about what are you willing to go out of your way to get to, and as Jake said, some things are commoditized, but you're willing to go to one place versus another. Every dry cleaner on the planet can give you back a clean suit, shirt, whatever it is that you're dropping off to be cleaned. Most of us go to the same one every time. Very few of them have a loyalty program, but we are loyal to that store or location. When it's inconvenient to us and we're willing to go somewhere, to me, that's emotional loyalty. So if I'm willing to go out of my way to get gas in a specific place or to go into a specific convenience store for whatever reason, it's cleaner, it's friendlier, they carry the brand that I like, whatever those things are, comes back to what you were just saying, Mike, and we've talked about a lot in what is it that customer expects and how do I deliver it? And to Jake's point, that all starts with knowing your customer and and knowing your customer in a different way than we've thought about that in the past. And again, I think loyalty programs have been used as a way to capture customer data without capturing customer expectation.
But there's no one size fits all when it comes to loyalty. I mean, obviously different industries, there's going to be different desires. I mean, as far as a convenience store, my guess would be geography would play a very big factor in it. I do a lot of road trips between Chicago and St. Louis because I work in both cities, and I know exactly the gas stations where I'm going to stop because they are cleaner, as you said, Dave. But with a dry cleaner, it's something as simple as I know the person working behind the counter. So, can you talk about the challenges then, first of, I mean, convenience store customers run the gamut. They're all different kinds. So how do you tailor a loyalty program when you have so many X factors like that?
I think it starts with probably defining very clearly who your customers are and thinking about what journeys those customers are on. So in the example you used, Ray, for your trip to St. Louis, it would be very helpful for those retailers to understand that's the kind of customer you are. And what I mean by that is having the flexibility to create a program that gives you enough value to stop there above and beyond what you're already doing. There's no value in them rewarding you for what you're already doing, which is stopping there, exactly at the time you do to put gas in your car and maybe get a snack. But if they can introduce you to perhaps a new food offering they have, and you can start to time that visit to a point where you're also buying food there because now they have the smoothie that you love at their location. That's how you take an understanding of who a customer is, what they're doing today, and leverage that through the right technology and the right program to drive incrementality. And I think it's even more so at play when you think locally and you think about how many times am I going here. There's one thing brought up to me a long time ago that has stuck with me, and I've probably said this to Mike before, so apologize if this is repetitive, but fuel retailers and marketers have a very interesting problem to solve that's unlike any other, in that almost all of their customers are stopping at their sites on the way to do something else that they want to do. Very few are making the gas station or the convenience store a destination. And if you understand that, mentality and the psychology that goes along with that, and at the same time, you present something that's actually enticing and actually personalized, there's a very big opportunity to create a little bit more of a destination, not a total destination, right? But a little bit more. And so I think that's the short response to your question, Rafer, is how do you create a program that's enticing? I think number one is that you make sure that you're delivering something of value to everybody that enrolls, and you do that by understanding what they do today and what the next thing you want them to do is. And it sounds like it's simple, but often is very complicated from a business perspective to do that, because it can go the gamut of who your customers are, what they're visiting for, and what they're buying.
Understanding your customer in any venue, any vertical, any sector is a complex undertaking. You've got data coming in from all different sides. It used to be just you could learn what you could learn from purchase data, but now we can enhance that with all kinds of different ancillary feeds. So Stuzo operates, I'm just going to call it a small ecosystem that's built around understanding the customer. Dave, you've done an awful lot of work in maybe not in C-store and fuel, but in understanding the data ecosystems that build customer insight. Can we talk a little bit, without getting too deep in the weeds, let's just put it this way, the best practices for doing that kind of thing in C-store and fuel without overstepping and becoming obtrusive, creepy, or actually violating the laws that are now popping up?
Yeah, I mean, again, I can jump in. I think for us, number one, it starts and it's grounded in the idea that it has to deliver value for the consumer and for the retailer. You cannot have a one-sided type of a program here. I don't care what technology you want to launch. I think we've seen this countless times again, where a retailer may say, hey, we're going to go launch this new innovative thing and it's going to do these great things, and then consumers don't adopt it, or vice versa. Consumers want something and financially it doesn't make sense for the retailer to support it. So I think the first is you have to find a nice balance between those two things. I think for me, the short answer is anytime you can remove friction from the consumer experience, it's a good thing. And I probably don't mean that like everyone else thinks of frictionless. I don't mean you have to have this crazy cool technology where you never take your phone out of your pocket and it checks you in because it scans your retina and you pay that way. I mean more so that if your goal is to get me to visit more, to do more things, to buy more things, to be more engaged with you as a retailer, don't make it hard for me to do that. You know, if I need to get you data for you to deliver a personalized experience, don't make it hard for me as a consumer to, in a very safe and trustworthy way, share that data with you. Don't make it hard for me to enroll in your program. Don't make it hard for me to, you know, add a digital tender type to my wallet inside your app. Don't make it hard for me to engage in any way, shape, or form. So I think the number one thing, Mike, for me, is to remove friction, and that's going to drive the type of results that, you know, the retailers are looking for as it relates to, you know, investing in these programs.
And Dave, you talk about that a lot.
Yeah, I sort of key off that, and I think really one of the things Jake said that I would echo strongly is that objective component, right? So even having advised on data acquisition in the past, my question to every client is, what are you going to do differently because you have that data? So I instead of starting with the question, which data do I need, it's what are you trying to achieve? To Jake's point of depending on that objective, depending on who your customer is, then it tells me what data should I be thinking about, what data is going to help me. If what I want to do is incrementality, I'm all over it, Jake, as an example, right? So you talked about we're trying to get that extra dollar from somebody or deliver that extra piece of value that brings something to us. Well, you know, is weather going to make a difference? And if so, let's go get weather data. And so when you're driving from Chicago to St. Louis and the weather is sunny versus snowy, what does that mean? And if that data is going to be super helpful to me, let me go and capture that data. If it doesn't make any difference, we see way too many companies getting wrapped around the axle on trying to capture every last bit of data that's out there. That's not going to actually do anything for the company, and even less so is going to deliver any value to the customer.
There's another piece of that we're seeing a little bit of on our end, and that's the, you know, not only the obsession of gathering and collecting as much data as possible, which I think you're exactly right, Dave, that becomes somewhat of a rabbit hole and potentially erodes trust for the consumer, because when you ask for something and you don't use it in the right way, you're putting yourself in a bad spot. But I think the other, and this is specific, Mike, to the vertical we've been talking a little bit about with convenience and fuel, is, you know, there are technologies in place already that are relatively ubiquitous. Meaning, you know, you don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel if you want to engage your customers. So as an example, we tell almost all of our customers to start with as little as a phone number to get somebody enrolled. The mobile phone number is a very powerful tool. One, it's almost universally the unique identifier for us. Some folks have two phones, that's fair, but many folks have a phone that they don't change. They could move, they could change jobs, change incomes, change cars. That phone number stays the same. Second is that every single point of sale system and every single pump across the 160,000 C-stores in the US has a PIN pad that you can enter a phone number at. There's no new technology. There's no new hurdle for a consumer to have to jump over to engage with your brand. And I think that is the type of thought process that marketers are starting to see and adopt as it relates to frictionless. You know, Amazon has it very nice when they want to launch an Amazon Go store and they just say, hey, Prime members that already have my app, you can use that app to open it up because I already have your payment on file. You know, but if somebody else wanted to go open a frictionless only store and require an app and require payment, they would have a much different sort of addressable member opportunity, let's call it, than Amazon does. And that same thing holds true for any physical retailer that wants to launch anything that's data driven. You have to make sure you maximize the number of people that can engage with your program, or it's not going to have the impact you want. And that's what we talk about when we talk about frictionless.
Well, I want to thank you, Jake and Dave, for the conversation, for your thinking. Clearly, there's an awful lot to talk about here. I mean, we're just at the very tip of a very big iceberg. But maybe it's a conversation we continue in a phase 2 of this. But for now, I just want to thank you for your time and your thinking. Thanks for joining us.